much, Richard. Okay. Yeah, thanks very much, Richard, and welcome everybody. We're going to move quite quickly on this subject. It's a really big subject. We're not going to. The terms and conditions of this session are we are just touching on the surface, and I'm really pleased to have Clare, André, and James join us. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves because I may hash it. So we've just got a few questions. Each of them is going to field a question, and then we've got time. They'll be sort of pitching in and answering as well if we've got some time. We probably won't. We are going to, if you've got questions, I encourage you to put them in the chat session. We are going to have a look at those because this is an area that we want to be looking at over a long period of time. So it's not just a one-off, but this is just introductory. So there may be people here who are attending who are able to access funding, provide funding, or just interested to know what the landscape is or to share their experiences. And we really want to try and sort of consolidate that. So Digital Northampton is in one part it's a network of people coming together, like-minded people from different sectors and areas to encourage innovation and development. But a key part of that, of course, is money. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. We may introduce a little bit of jargon. There may be a few acronyms as we go that will be helpful. We'll explain what they are. And so one of the phrases you may hear, certainly in the context of government or local authorities, is we hear economic development. So economic development for an area, for a region, is something that we talked about in a broad sort of umbrella sense around funding, and different sectors can benefit from that. And so I'm going to start with André. Can you unpack that for us as quickly as possible? So these are big questions asking for small answers, and a really quick introduction of who you are and why you're answering this one, André. That'd be great.
Sure. Good morning, all, and morning, Ken. And it's brilliant to be here. The opportunities in terms of economic development have come to me in many areas. I've run and still run a development alliance, a membership trade alliance overseas, and linking the UK with Asia. I've also been part of local government for the last 35 years in Northamptonshire and represented my communities locally. So I've straddled both the public and the private sector and understand obviously the pressures between most of those. I've also worked with economic development bodies and very proudly established with colleagues the Enterprise Partnership for Northamptonshire, which was then morphed into the South East Midlands LEP, or South East Midlands Local Area Economic Partnership. Those sort of areas really are vital, as we know. And I suppose unpacking the question, Ken, about what is economic development, probably the biggest reply there, or biggest answer to that would be what isn't, because quite clearly everything that is enablement about linking businesses with government long-term policy really is economic development. It means that there will be support. And in this country, obviously, we do it in various different ways, but predominantly government doesn't create jobs. It's commercial, it's business that does. And therefore, the enablement of land, of enterprise partnerships, of enterprise zones, of just bringing through some drivers that say at the end of the day, we will lay down the infrastructure from a government perspective to encourage businesses to backfill, is really that economic development, I suppose, key theme. The visitor economy in our own area of Northamptonshire, which obviously covers also the East Midlands and certainly down to London in that area too, will cover some worth of around about £2 billion if you look at that entire area. Yet we're also in the area of the new Silicon Valley that's been identified effectively between the Oxford and Cambridge Arc, and the potential opportunities that digital has in terms of revolutionising the entirety of auto sport, whether it be Motorsport Valley, or whether it be looking at those futuristic technologies which are coming to us. We need to increase skills, and obviously with those bring better paid jobs. And that's really vital for economic development. And not wishing to cross over any of my colleagues who are going to be presenting this morning as well, there is a huge strand about funding, and it's so essential that there is great support post pandemic recovery is absolutely critical, because the hubs, those energizing and stimulating points in our economy, come through different areas. They come through predominantly from that hard physical build, and that can be public realm stuff, that can be really enablement in terms of business quarters and looking at setting up facilities for people to establish small businesses, and working really from that micro business, from that development of that small business which is developed in a back room, in someone's spare room, on someone's digital platform, and bring it forward and employing someone else. And that really is absolutely essential. What the Golden Globe has to be about developing, going from that micro SME up to a major body and a major enhancer, and bringing in PLC. Blue chip, white chip, you name it, any chip at the end of the day. You know, if we can produce something that is not just a great idea and a great creative, but something that turns the wheels either in this country or links us globally, then success through economic development is really an answer. It's got to be powerful. And I think economic development with strands that are short-lived are brilliant from a marketing angle, but need to have long legs to be successful from an employment angle. And I think there are some really key areas, if you're thinking key themes, and some of those really are having local government on board, having central government on board, but also having an international flavour. If from an economic development perspective, those strands are limited to certain very small structures only, then they can't engage in a better way going further. So it's really key that there is an openness and a willingness to do business right across multi-sector link-ups. The success, I think, has to be absolutely about involving people, but also about involving technology of today, and also future-proofing, whether it's Internet of Everything or things effectively, and going forward, or it is linking up those new platforms which are coming together on a permanent and virtual basis on a regular agenda item. We've certainly had a well turned round the last 24 months. I would say that everyone has perhaps rethought the way that they develop themselves, their businesses and their opportunities. One thing that people should never lack are creative skills. And in fact, the more time there is to develop it, the better. And I'd say that virtual platforms enable those things to happen in a far faster way. I mean, we were discussing this morning the fact that the 24-hour clock really is very, very reachable and attainable these days in terms of crossing boundaries. Whether people jumped on planes before, and I hope they really do going forward again, and I'm sure people will do for lots of different reasons. But I think predominantly that will be a leisure scenario, because business continues on every platform, on every level. So if we can do our best, and I'm talking with my enterprise hat on as well as the local government perspective, of linking up those opportunities with future dynamic platforms, then I think we've got a record for success and a recipe for success there, which I think is really essential. Ken, there's a million more parts to this, I'm sure. Yes. I don't want to steal anybody else's thunder, but I'm happy to take any points and certainly enable and assist.
Yeah, great. Thank you, André. As I say, that was such a big question, and I think a really good initial answer. So, what isn't it? Because you've covered so many things there. You're talking about strengths, talking about skills, alignment, what the government can do around infrastructure, where the responsibility, size of business, sectors, etc. So that's really helpful, whistle stop, and I really sort of thank you. There's a lot of interesting, helpful comments coming up in chat as well about. Particularly, you referenced SEMLEP. That's come up there. I saw that. I think Rob Purdy put a note on there as well. So thanks everyone for that. So we will be consolidating these. James, on our agreed questions, I'm gonna skip the types of funding available, because I think that can also become almost our bullet point list, and we'll try and cover that. But just to link in and overlap with the pieces that André was picking up on. What are some of the success factors? So in part, there's an overlap to what André's just said. And if you can just do a quick intro on yourself and your background as well, please, James.
So thanks, Ken, and thanks all. So I'm James Cushing. I started off probably working for André quite a few years ago now in economic development in Northamptonshire. I then went on to be head of economic development over at a neighbouring Central Beds. I chaired, lucky enough to chair the National Economic Development Officer Society. So that's where we looked across economic development over certainly all of England's council areas. Managed then to go and try a different bit of the public sector. Did 2 years down at Department for Media, Culture and Sport, and managed one of the large broadband programs down there before going into private sector and working for City Fibre as the manager for the deployment we've got in Northampton. So pretty similar to André, actually, about the kind of the breadth and sort of experience about that public-private side of economic development. And I'd agree with all the points André said about the breadth and scale of it. And I think that does link a lot into what some of the key success factors are. So, you know, I'll start off with this. You know, Rob and Lewis on the chat have put some great links into sources of funding. There is a huge amount of funding or initiatives and bodies out there. In fact, it can be almost a sort of a minefield trying to navigate that. And you know, we need that partnership and colleagues with the FSB and others to sort of help navigate that. And I think what we've seen over the last few years in particular is that kind of public-private partnership that André mentioned coming to the fore. So we go back just a few, you know, not even years, it's still live, a lot of it now. We talk about local growth deals that have been signed between local authorities, the private sector and government, releasing funding. We look now at sort of the Building Back Better Fund, the Towns Fund, Levelling Up Fund, whatever the future funding will be around shared prosperity funding or the replacements European funding. Really doesn't matter what the funding sort of stream was. One of the key things that sort of I've learned, you know, and there's even courses on this out there, it's around the business case sort of development for that funding. Government will call it the sort of the green book. You will look at sort of better business cases funding, the 5 business cases. It's as I said, it's probably about a 250-page manual on this that the Treasury have developed that is used to assess all government funding bids, and then that's sort of put through at different levels. And they look at, you know, the key things within this is a number of specific cases, you know, first of which is the strategic case. We need a very compelling, very clear sort of vision of what we're trying to achieve, how we're going to achieve that. Yes, there will be overlaps and into sort of dependencies on that, but that clear vision of where we want to get to, what the problem is with, what the market failure, what the problem we're going to be addressing with is absolutely essential. Without that, the other cases will fall. Linked to that, you need then a strong management case, that the team that are going to be sort of managing and delivering this. You know, I was working with a number of sort of businesses when we were doing sort of regional growth funding bids a few years ago, and it was quite eye-opening to me how you really started to need that mix of local authority bid or government sort of bid development, but with the private sector sort of financial management and sort of drive on that side. So you need that team, that management case that links into then the financial case, which is all about having a robust plan, how it's going to be spent, what's the need for spending, where we're coming from that. You then need to look quite clearly at kind of the management case, so the financial case, the management case, the strategic case, and there's one final case which is desperately sort of trying to remember the acronym for it. But in effect, this is it's then about assessing this, how we're going to assess and value, sort of look at the metrics for impact. So there are some quite sort of significant sort of evidence already out there around the value of investment, as André was pointing out. You know, whether this is a program to support skills or infrastructure, what these funders are going to be looking for is what's the impact this is going to have over the longer term, and how specifically can that be measured and implemented. So I think putting those together, it really is that kind of mix of the challenge. The funding is only going to be getting more competitive. You look across the sort of the range of sort of schemes that are out there. You know, whether it's myself, we've been recently bidding internally to get extra funding for infrastructure rollout from our investors, and you know, it is super competitive out there. And I know from sort of times in local government and government, again, these cases are really competitive, and we've got to make sure we're hitting what the funders are looking for, You know, there are funds out there for house building, for innovation, for new business startup. We've got to be aligning to what the funding is requiring. And I think it's that kind of golden thread of our vision, how that's going to deliver sort of our objectives, our shared objectives, how the programme and the funding can be effectively managed, what's the project management behind that, and then also the evaluation and impact that you can evidence for all that, and the lessons learned you come from that. And that is consistent, and it's one thing I have to say, it's been quite consistent across any of the funding packages that I've seen to. The scales will vary differently. You know, you will need a different business case for a £200 million sort of major road scheme than you will a micro business support scheme, but the principles are always going to be the same.
James, thank you so much. And so just really quick summary on that. It's like get organised, be strategic, and you broke that down really, really well, talking about the strategic case, what problems are going to be addressed, you know, is there strong management around it, and then how is it going to be assessed? So is that money just going to go into a black hole and never be see the light of day again, or is it actually going to lead to something as well? So that's really, really helpful. Again, these are really unfair questions, so appreciate everything, you know, André and you have just said there to summarize it. And as I said, just to reiterate, this is hopefully just the start of you know, signposting and talking about this as a subject. So Claire, coming to you, you're wearing two hats with this, and I think you have a really interesting perspective on this area, but also the question. So the question for you is how good are we as a region, as an area? Because I suspect this is, I've worked in different parts of the UK and I've worked overseas and had partnerships overseas. And what you always hear is the grass is always greener on the other side. Other people are always better at doing this than we are, and insert whoever we is in there. So, but what would your assessment be? So Claire, very quick introduction as to who you are, your two hats, and then what's your assessment from your perspective about how good are we at this in the region?
Okay, morning everyone. My name is Clare Elsby. I'm co-founder of Elsby & Co, which is a firm of accountants in the county. So we work with businesses of all shapes and sizes across all sectors. The common denominator being that they tend to all be owner-managed businesses. My voluntary hat is I joined the FSB, which is the largest lobbying member organisation in the UK, in 1993 when we set up our business from a back bedroom in Northampton. And I'm now on the English policy unit, so I report directly into the national level at FSB and pick up issues right across the East Midlands. So that is my patch. So the question today really is, how good is this region at obtaining finance? And what I'll do is I'll split that finance down into two areas, simply into private finance and public finance. So with private finance, we've got mostly venture capital, we've got EIS and SEIS funding generally. There was a recent report by Invest Midlands, and that came out on the 26th of May. And to put it into perspective, in Birmingham, they did deals last year of 8 million. In London, that figure was 8.1 billion. Oxford was 414 million, and Cambridge was 206 million. So the Midlands area is not good at actually sourcing this finance. So what can we do about this? And one of the initiatives that the government has done is they've introduced what's called the British Business Bank, and I can see that Lewis is actually on the chat today as the East Midlands representative. And the role for the British Business Bank is to actually level out the financial opportunities across the areas. And his role really is to try and make sure that the East Midlands gets the proper bite of the cherry. And one of the main issues that they find, well, what they've done is they've got a collaboration with the LEPs in the area, of which SEMLEP, as Rob Purdy's put in the chat, is in our patch. And they've designed the Midlands Engine Investment Fund, which I believe James referenced. The issue, and I'll just quote from a recent report, the most recent evaluation report of the Midlands Engine Investment Fund's progress sets out a basic lack of investment readiness in Midlands companies described as significant and persistent. And it's a lack of financial literacy and experience. And there's a limited awareness of options and an inability to present propositions. So the question is, there is a lot of finance available, as James has said, but we're not very good at actually putting proposals together. And we don't appear to have that ecosystem in the East Midlands which allows us to do that. And that's potentially something that we should be working on. If you look just literally down the road at the A14 at Cambridge and then Oxford, you know, they're obviously very good at that. So either local businesses have to be prepared to pay and get that expertise to be able to put together robust applications for funding, or that actually they have to have better record keeping internally and have more confidence in their plans and their proposals. That's not to say that there isn't money going out on from the Midlands Engine Investment Fund, and you can go on their website and see all the local businesses that have actually benefited from that. But what I'm saying is that funding is available, but we're not very good at getting that.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you to the three of you. We covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, and thank you for sort of the input there from Rob, who's put another item on there as well, and you mentioned Lewis as well. That's really great. So this is a really rich area that no pun intended, that, you know, we need to, as Digital Northampton, we want to be able to sort of flag things, bring people together, help point people in the right direction. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. So I really do appreciate all the input from you, and I think we could have a day's conference on this subject alone. So maybe that's one that we can just sort of, you know, think about. But we're discussing having this subject on the podcast because I think, again, there's so much more we could talk about, and really it's the heart of it. So thank you. I'm sorry there's not time to cover the questions at the moment, but this is just really sort of kick off the day. This is a really sort of important, dare I say, grown up part of what Digital Northampton's about. So just wanted to pass on my thanks to you, James, to you, Claire, and to you, André, as well. And that was fantastic. You covered the ground so well. So appreciate your time. Thank you.